Okay, the first motion shaft. Okay, this is the one that came out of the transmission I'm currently working on that we still have to split apart and change the bearings on. This is one from the parts, one that I have. So I practiced on it. So this is what it looks like when it's apart. Oh, the other thing I don't have is the bolt that goes in here that attaches all this through. So basically, this shoulder is on here, and then this bearing fits on here, and this fits inside. So this is that race, the outside race for the bearing that takes up the extra space you need in the front of the case. Now, how you get it apart? First thing is you're gonna need to take out that cap there, and let me see what we have here. 5/16. Okay, 5/16 will take and loosen that up and take it out completely. This part of the shaft here, you can grip it in a vise. It doesn't ride on anything, so there's nothing that needs this. Just if you do gouge it, polish it up when you're done a little bit, keep the chips out, and you can hold it and take that out. I did have to apply a little heat. You might notice that. I really wasn't worried about heat in one spot, as this is parts, but if I have to apply heat, I'll be a little easier on distributing it around this one. Then the heat broke out the thread locker that was in there from this one. I know this one had thread locker on it. So then once you do that, I'll get a pointer here, you get a bearing separator right in here. So, and the bearing separator will then have this piece will then be forced out, and you'll have this bearing left behind and the other bearing left on the other shaft, just halfway, because the other half is sticks out. As it comes apart, you'll see. But that is, sorry for the little bit of motion. I'm trying to do this one-handed here. So that is the next step. Okay, so this is how I have mine set up, and I just loosened it. So I won't take you through all of the turning of the bolt, but you get the idea. So okay, getting ready to separate. So this is, I've got this set up just lightly sitting in the vise just to keep it held up so I can do all my work. I'm not actually going to be doing anything there. So this will go under there. The bearing separator will work to pull the two pieces apart. So once I'm done that, I'll show. Okay, so I have separated. I did have to put a little heat down around the base just to help it to come out. But and the bearing wants to, but I say that's it. Put that on the bench. That's the outside of that bearing, and of course, say that's the other bearing, which I'll pop off here in a second, and we can start renewing bearings, and that's where this is. Clean it all up, and then start putting back together new bearings. Okay, so here are all the parts broken down. It's all apart. I'm going to do some inspection of surfaces of what we're reusing and clean everything up, and we'll see about the new bearings and putting it back together. Okay, so this is assembly of the first motion shaft. The bearing has been pressed onto here. The bearing has been pressed onto here. Now this presses into here, and I also put some RTV in between where the seal goes and its seat. So that's in too. So sorry for the shake. But that's where we're at next. Next is to put these two together, and the first motion shaft should be done. Okay, so the first motion shaft is together. I don't have the bolt in the center yet, and I did press it. Did press it together. Doing the press, it's a delicate operation and not something I can hold the camera in one hand and film while I'm doing it. So That's together. I'll get the bolt in it, get some thread locker on it, and we'll move on to the next step. Okay, the bolt is in, and it's labeled at, this is how I held it before. It doesn't harm where we're at to do it. And 26-28 foot-pounds is what it recommends. And I did that, and I did some blue thread locker, because with that low torque, red getting it out may cause more harm than good when you try to get it out again later. So blue is a little bit better, I think, for something that only has 26 pounds of torque on it. Okay. I have started putting the first motion shaft back in, so right now I still have a little further to get it in here. I've pressed it in, as the book says, to get it started, and then draw it in with the front cover. So I used a little bit longer bolts, and that worked out really well. What I have to do right now, well, I have a new seal in here, and of course remember to put the new bearing in the middle before you put that in there, otherwise you're going to take things back out. So we have 3 new bearings, new seal, and what I have to do now is take this ring, I'll probably mount it into here, and then I will use bearing mount to draw it into there with the cover. So that's where I'm at now. Then after that is removed, we'll take it off, do some measuring, make sure we have the right shim, and of course the book says to put the larger shim you have in when you set the bearings in place without a gasket, and then measure everything and then determine what size you need, if I'm reading the book right, I hope. That's where I'm at now, so I will continue on with this. Okay, so I have set the outer ring in, drawn up with the 4 bolts on the front casing to set the ring, and the ring has bearing compound, has Loctite to hold the ring and the bearing together so it doesn't move. Okay, now take this all back out so we can measure for what the proper thickness of the shim should be. I am now ready to put the lower shaft back in, and I did attempt to do it with the bearing still on this side, but it wasn't going in the way I liked it to. I felt it just wasn't working out. Trying to do a shortcut. So I'm going to put that shaft in and then continue with the book of putting in the bearings after that. And 5th gear. I took this wire and suspended 5th gear. Sorry if you can't see it too well down there, but I suspended it up about where it goes. That way I'm not having to dig around the bottom for it once I start putting all the other gears in place. So that'll make it a little easier to get it in position when it comes time for its shaft to go in. I am working on getting the lower shaft in. What I did is I took a piece of wire. I'm sorry I didn't take a photo of that, but basically piece of wire, went down, wrapped it around the lower cluster, held it up in place, which helped align everything up, because then the gears were meshed, and I had to make a tool for the back to keep that shaft centered, and that was a quick tool to make up. And now that I've put the front bearing in, it needs to go in even more, so the circlip can go in. But what I'm going to do, since it is in, I'm going to in almost all the way, I'm going to get the back bearing in, and then I think I can get the rest of the bearings lined up to go in. So that's where I'm at now, is to pull out my little adapter here and get that bearing in. Alright, front bearing is in with circlip. That nut's just on temporarily, but it is there. Getting that back bearing in was fun. I mean, it was a whole lot of fun. Basically, it was nice to have this piece here that I made up. It was nice to use that as a driver, because that worked out well. Yeah, getting that in, that is tough. Getting that one back in is tough. But I think it's in home all the way down. I'll verify that with some looking at some other photos I did, just to make sure. And I might even pull up the open other box and make sure that its protrusion is about the same. But that's where I am at now, and everything is spinning free. Everything seems like it's lined up fine. Everything lined up fine. And there's that reverse idler held up by the wire, which works out well. And I'm going to move on to the next step. Getting this lower bearing in so that it's flush was that getting it that last, I guess, 1/16 of an inch was the hard part. Tried hitting on the nylon piece, and it just I guess it was bouncing too much. Ended up taking a nice soft brass rod and worked it around until it seated in finally. I checked it first by putting the gear on to see how it meshed with the top gear, and this gear was sticking out just about 1/16 of an inch, which is why that had to go in more. Now the edge of this gear matches the edge of this gear, and I think that puts them in alignment, and it's in as far as it's going to go. So everything still is spinning free, nothing binding, nothing doing what it shouldn't do. So I'm going to continue on. Okay, just to show you, the two of them do match up correctly, and now I have to take the 5th gear back off so that I can get the shaft in for the reverse. Okay, for those interested, I have a pair of 90-degree long needle nose pliers, which I put inside the reverse idler gear to get it put into position, and then I'll put the shaft in and remove the pliers from there. So that's how I'm doing that. Okay, idler gear is on the selector pin in position, and the shaft is in. What I have to do now is to get the collar on, and the book kind of gives a vague reference of which way it should go. It is vague. I'm going to open up the top of the other box, look inside real quick, and that'll tell me. Alright. Okay, this is the box that I first started with that was way too worn out, and the other one's in much better shape. Okay, just this ring right here. Maybe it's easier to do it this way. See how one side is very different than the other? Okay, so I'm looking in here, and I don't know if you can tell, but the side with the chamfer, I'd say, goes towards the front of the box. Sorry for the shake. Goes to the front of the box. So this goes in here with the chamfer facing forward. That was what I needed to know, and I never took that box, the guts apart, so that should still be good. Okay, the collar is back on, pin is in, it's facing the right direction, so that's all secured. Front is back in. I lined up the grub screw, which is right there below it, and now I took it back out, cleaned everything, about to put some thread locker on it per book, and then that should be done. Alright, 5th gear is on, and the grub screw, of course, is in, locating everything. Yeah, it took a little bit. Was interesting getting it on when the little tabs inside the synchro wanted to pop out, and that was fun. Take it all apart and put it back together. So yes, now the next thing is to put all the lock tabs, washers, and get everything tightened up. So, but everything's still running pretty free. So I'm gonna get everything all tightened up and where it should be, and then I'll go from there. Just a shot of the tool I made up to lock 5th in place while I tighten up the nut on that end, and the other nuts too. Now I need to go just look up the torque, get the torque wrench out, and make sure everything's done to spec. Okay, time to take 2 steps back, and we'll see how we go from there. Okay, time to redo some things. I was having problems. This shaft is back out now, at the lower end. I could tighten up the back to torque, but the moment I even got halfway to torquing the front, everything would start binding. So there was something going on in there, and really there's not a whole lot to consider there to be an issue. And that actually goes in like this. This bearing goes to the back. These two go to the front. That's the layout right there. This spacer goes in to hold the front of the cluster. This goes in, tightens down the nut. The back, this bearing goes in, and this isn't the old bearing, old style bearing. There's a different, new, updated bearing for the back end here. Of course, looking at the books, the new bearing, which this is a double row bearing, the new bearing is a single and has a spacer. But what's not clear reading the notes in the book is whether or not you have to use a different cluster inside, because there are 2 different clusters. So, and this box is before that change was made. So if I ended up having to change this bearing, because maybe they don't have the new ones anymore, this one anymore, would I have to get a different cluster in there, which means taking everything apart to change a cluster. So, big questions. So, because things weren't torquing upright and working out, and the book says that if things start binding, you can tap with a soft face hammer, tap the shaft on either end. Tried that, didn't work well. Nope. So, we're going to go back and try this again, putting it together. What I did do is I took the faces of where everything rides and I polished them up, and I polished the inside of the case. I polished the bearings just to make sure there was nothing on them that was causing an issue. So, okay, so we will, as I said, we've hit the Wayback Machine. We're going to rewind this and start over. So tightening up, I've got the lower rear shaft nut torqued correctly. I've got the front torqued correctly. Everything's spinning free. The challenge is trying to keep the box in place while tightening up the top rear nut. That's the challenge right now. So I'm going to have to enlist another set of hands, because it's just trying to get 150 pounds of torque on that nut and hold everything in position. It's getting to be a little bit much for myself by one person. So I'm going to get some help, but I will say the box is spinning free. It's nice. I like the way it feels and sounds. So, number 2. So we did the second try, did much better. Okay, and it did start binding, but what I did, I tried the soft face hammer, and that wasn't working too well. So I took a punch in the center here, where it has that dimple, and I hit that with the punch, and then I heard a click, and everything was beautiful after that. So yeah, it was just trying to get that to seat in correctly. So that's where I'm at now.